She was the fourth person to be interviewed that morning and the only one they told to leave before noon. It was 11:22 a.m. on a Wednesday on the 14th floor of Bright Continental Holdings on Bourdion Road in Ikoyi, Lagos, when Mrs. Blessing Obisachina looked across the interview table and said, "We'll be in touch." She said it the way people say it when they have already decided, with the pen already capped and the folder already closing, and the eyes already moving to the clock on the wall above the candidate's head. Zuri Adeyezu Nwosu was 28 years old and 7.5 months pregnant, and she had taken 2 buses and a KK to get from Surulere to Ikoyi that morning. She had left the room she rented on Adeniran Ogunsanya Street at 6:55 a.m. The interview lasted 11 minutes. The 3 candidates who came in after her were still upstairs when she pressed the ground floor button in the elevator and waited for the doors to close. She did not know that the man stepping through the lobby door as she stepped out of the elevator had been looking for her for 11 weeks. But he recognized her husband's face the moment the photograph fell out of her bag and landed on the marble floor between them. Her name was Zuri Adeyezu Nwosu. She was 28 years old and weighed 112 pounds at 7.5 months. The nurse at the public maternity clinic on Maloney Street in Lagos Island had written the number in the margin of her antenatal card in February and circled it. Zuri had looked at the circle and said nothing. She had not explained that she was eating 1 meal a day, so that the 47 naira remaining in her first bank account could stretch until she found work. She carried a small spiral planner with a creased brown cover she had bought from a stationery boy in traffic on the Apapa Oshodi Expressway for 500 naira the week she arrived in Lagos. The planner had 2 kinds of entries, columns of numbers in the pages, and her handwriting in the margins around the numbers. Working through scenarios the way someone works through a problem they believe has a solution. If they turn it enough times, the current page read 47,000 naira. Monthly rent second month, 55,000. Shortfall in 5 weeks, 8,000. She had done the arithmetic 4 different ways. The arithmetic did not change. She had been a financial analyst for 3 years at Omowale and Partners in Abuja, where she had joined at 24 as the most junior person in the firm, and by the end of her second year had rebuilt the client reporting system from a manual Excel process into an automated model that reduced the partner's reporting time by 11 hours per cycle. The managing partner, Remy Omowale, had worked in finance for 31 years and had, after the model's first live run, shaken her hand and said only, "You have a head for this." She had remembered those 6 words. They had been enough. Emeka had died on a Thursday in October 4 months ago in a road accident on the Abuja-Kefi Expressway at 4:47 in the afternoon. He was 31 years old. He had been a software and systems contractor, and he had been driving home from a site visit when a truck crossed the median. The police report used 17 words to describe the accident. Zuri had read those 17 words 9 times before she understood what they meant and did not read them again. She had stayed in Abuja for 6 weeks and then moved to Lagos because she had no family in Abuja, and because staying in the apartment on Gwarimpa Avenue was something she could not continue to do. She carried his photograph in her tote bag, a canvas bag with a small embroidered weaver bird on the front that Emeka had found at a craft market in Oshodi and presented to her on their second date, explaining with complete seriousness that the weaver bird was the best bird, a claim she had never confirmed or denied. She no longer washed the inside lining of the bag. It still had his smell. The photograph showed the 2 of them at the craft market, the bag already on her shoulder, both mid-loaf at something the photographer said that neither of them could remember afterward. Her goal, stated simply, was a job before the baby came. 6 weeks. That was the arithmetic. 6 weeks, 47,000 naira, and a landlord on Adeniran Ogunsanya Street who had told her quietly on the day she signed the tenancy that he would need confirmation of employment before the end of the month, or he would have to rent to someone else. She did not think of herself as desperate. She thought of herself as working a numbers problem. Bright Continental Holdings occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower on Bourdion Road in Ikoyi, and its ground floor lobby had the temperature and the silence of a place where important decisions are made on other people's behalf. Cream marble, potted palms in the corners, 2 security desks, and a reception counter staffed by a young woman named Ada Nwachukwu, who wore a uniform blazer 2 sizes too large and who had offered Zuri a cup of water when she arrived at 9:48 a.m. Zuri had said thank you and sat down. The chair she was given had a back leg shorter than the others. It tilted a fraction to the left, barely perceptible, but enough. She opened her tote bag, removed the paperback she carried, and wedged it under the short leg without drawing attention to what she was doing. Then she opened the planner and sat. Ada watched this from behind the desk. She looked at the tote bag. "Is that a weaver bird on your bag?" Zuri looked down. "Yes." "Did you embroider it yourself?" "No," she said. "My husband found it." Ada nodded and did not ask more. But she looked at the bag for a moment longer, the way you look at something that tells you about a person without that person, knowing they are being read. Mrs. Blessing Obiachina arrived in the lobby at 10:09 a.m. to escort the morning's candidates to the 14th floor. She was 41 years old with a name tag clipped to her blazer that read Blessing Human Resources and the measured manner of someone who has interviewed very many people and found very few of them suitable. She looked at each candidate as they stood. When she looked at Zuri, her eyes moved in a specific order. Face, midsection, face again, then to the planner. The look lasted 2 seconds. She said nothing. On the 14th floor, the interview room had floor-to-ceiling windows facing south toward the lagoon. The light that morning was gray, rain coming across the water, a dark curtain moving toward the island. Mrs. Obiachina asked 8 questions. Zuri answered each of them in full, with figures she did not need to look up because that was what her mind did with numbers, held them in structure, in relation available. The pen on Mrs. Obiachina's notepad did not move. By the 7th question, the folder on the table was already angled toward closing. When Zuri stepped out of the elevator 11 minutes later, the candidate who had been called in before her, a man in his late 20s with a resume printed on heavy paper and a handshake Zuri had heard through the waiting room wall, was already being escorted back upstairs for a second round. The air on Bourdion Road at noon was thick with the coming rain and the smell of hot asphalt. Zuri stood on the pavement outside the tower with the planner open and looked at the numbers again. 47,000 naira. 5 weeks until the second month's rent. 6 weeks until the baby. She stood on the pavement long enough that the security guard at the building's side entrance looked over at her twice. She took a keke back toward the mainland because it was 200 naira cheaper than the bus from Ikoyi. The seat was hard plastic, and the road between the island and the bridge had potholes that, at 7.5 months, she felt in her lower back. The rain arrived when she was still on the bridge, not gradually but all at once, the kind that reduces everything beyond 15 meters to gray and turns the lagoon below into a churning pale brown. The cake driver pulled under the flyover and cut the engine. Rain hit the corrugated roof of the shelter above them in a sound like gravel dropped from height. Under the flyover, the air was thick with wet concrete and the exhaust of backed-up traffic, and somewhere from the direction of the lagoon, a smell like fish and salt and distance came with the wind. Someone near the pillar was selling groundnuts from a polythene bag, calling a price nobody was answering. A woman next to Zuri in the keek adjusted her geel against the damp and looked at the road ahead and said nothing. On the bridge above them, somewhere in the backed-up traffic, someone leaned on a horn for 30 unbroken seconds. Zuri kept the planner open on her knee and did arithmetic while the rain came down. 14 companies approached in 6 weeks. 4 interviews secured. 3 rejections by Wednesday. She had a skill, she knew she had it, had seen its results, had watched Remy Omawala's face when the 12 million naira discrepancies surfaced mid-meeting from memory, but no interview had lasted long enough to reveal it. 9 minutes. 14 minutes, 11 minutes. You cannot show what a mind does with numbers in 11 minutes if the decision has already been made about a different thing entirely. Her phone buzzed as the rain began to ease. A message from an unknown number. Your application has been advanced to the next stage. Please confirm your availability for a second interview. She stared at it for a full 60 seconds. She typed back, "I am available any time this week or next." She sent it and put the phone face down on her knee. She breathed differently for the rest of the ride back to Surulere. The room on Adeniran Ogunsanya Street was small. A single room with a ceiling fan that made a clicking sound every third rotation and a window that faced the compound wall. She had not unpacked the second box. She set the tote bag on the bed and took out the photograph, Emeka Midlaw, and stood it against the water bottle on the table by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a while. At 4:18 p.m., her phone rang. Mrs. Obiachina. A bright Continental Holdings number. "I'm calling to clarify," she said. Our automated system triggered that message in error before the internal review was complete. The position has been filled. We wish you well in your search, Zuri said. I understand. Down. The ceiling fan clicked, then clicked again. At 4:31 p.m., a WhatsApp message from the landlord arrived. Please confirm your employment status by Friday, or I will need to revisit our arrangement. She ate the jollof rice she bought from the bucketeria across the road and went to sleep at 9 p.m. and woke at 4:47 a.m. with the numbers already running. She identified 3 more companies she had not yet applied to, drafted cover letters that evening with specific figures pulled from each company's last published annual report, figures she recalled without looking them up, and printed them at the copy center on the main road for 150 naira per page. She paid for the printing in coins from the inside of the tote bag because the clasp of her wallet had broken and she had not yet replaced it. The woman at the copy center watched her count the coins out on the counter without comment. She went to all 3 companies on Thursday. The first had vacated its listed address. A security guard at the new tenant's office told her this without looking up, and she stood for a moment in the lobby with the printed cover letter in her hand before she folded it and put it back in the bag. The second declined walk-in applications at the intercom without opening the door. She pressed the button 3 times, waited 20 seconds each time, and then wrote no entry next to the company name in her planner and started walking. The third company had a recruitment freeze, a fact posted on a paper sign inside the glass door that she read through the glass from the pavement. She stood there long enough to read it twice. Then she wrote the date next to the name in the planner and noted she would check the freeze status in 2 weeks. She crossed 3 lines. She opened to the next page. She started another list. On Friday morning, she went back to Bright Continental Holdings because she had left her antenatal card inside the application folder she had handed to Mrs. Obiachina's department on Wednesday. She needed the card by Monday. The maternity clinic at Maloney Street required it at every visit, or they would not see her. She did not want to go back. She went back. She arrived at the lobby at 9:33 a.m. Ada Nwachukwu looked up from the reception desk and recognized her and did not look away. Zuri explained what she needed. Just the antenatal card. Just a moment. She understood if it was inconvenient. Ada picked up the desk phone and dialed. A pause. Ada's face changed very slightly around the eyes. She said, Ada began, and then stopped and looked at Zuri, and then looked at the phone, said quietly. She says, you can fill out a retrieval form at the front desk, and they'll mail any items to you. The card had her name and blood type, and the 4 months of measurements the clinic had recorded since November. They would mail it to her. Zuri looked at Ada. Ada looked at Zuri. If this story is landing the way I think it is, subscribe before we get to what happened next, because what Chief Taiwo saw when he stepped through that lobby door is something Zuri Adeze Nwosu never expected would change the direction of everything. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then the door from the car park corridor opened, and Chief Adeyemi Taiwo walked through it. He was 63 years old and broad in the shoulders, in the way of men who have not stopped working with their hands even after they stopped needing to. He had built Bright Continental Holdings from a 2-person trading company in Port Harcourt in 1989 into a group employing more than 4,000 people across logistics, real estate, and financial services. He used the private lift on the north side of the building every morning, but on Fridays the facilities team serviced it, and he came through the main lobby instead. He had been doing this on Fridays for 11 years. He was pulling his phone from his jacket pocket and walking toward the main elevator bank when the tote bag slipped from Zuri's shoulder as she turned and the photograph fell out and landed on the marble floor between them. He looked down at it before either of them moved to retrieve it. Then he went completely still. His phone hand dropped to his side. His mouth did not open. He crouched slowly at 63 and picked the photograph up himself and stood and looked at it for a moment that lasted longer than the action needed to. Emeka Okafor had worked for Bright Continental Holdings from January through September of last year. He had designed and implemented the integrated security architecture for 3 floors of the Bourdion Road Tower, a project that came in 9 weeks ahead of schedule and 1.2 million naira under its budget. The facilities director, a man named Ola Adebayo, who had been in facilities management for 22 years, had written a personal commendation about the contractor, the only time in his career he had done so unprompted. Emeka had died in October before signing the final invoice, and his estate had submitted no claim, and the legal department had filed the account as incomplete and closed it. Taiwo had discovered this during an internal audit review 11 weeks ago and had called it, in the meeting where it was discussed, a failure of the company's obligations. He had directed his assistant to locate the contractor's next of kin immediately and make it right. The trail had led to an Abuja address, then gone cold. He looked at the photograph. He looked at the canvas bag with the embroidered weaver bird on the front. The bag Emeka's wife carries everywhere. Ola Adebayo had said. He mentioned it once. He looked at Zuri. He said, "Is this your husband?" She said, "Yes." He looked at the photograph for 3 more seconds. Then he said, "Come upstairs." He said it with the quietness of someone who does not need volume to be heard. Ada Nwachukwu, behind the reception desk, set the phone receiver down without a word. The conference room on the 14th floor was not the interview room. It was larger and quieter, with windows facing north toward Lagos Island and a table long enough that the far end was in a different quality of light. Taiwo sat across from Zuri and placed the photograph on the table between them, face up. He told her what he knew. He told it without preamble and without softening it, which was how he told things that required honesty rather than comfort. He described the contract, 9 months of work, 3 floors, a security infrastructure that Ola Adebayo had called the most competently executed contractor project in the building's 15-year history on Bordeaux Road. He described the October finding, the audit, the closed account, the 11 weeks his assistant had spent trying to find a current address in Abuja. He said the outstanding balance, the final invoice of 4 million naira plus 4 months of statutory interest at the rate applicable to delayed contractor payments, would be transferred to any account she designated by the close of business on Tuesday. Zuri looked at the photograph on the table. She looked at her hands. She said, "He never told me the company name." Taiwo said no. Outside the north windows, the sky over Lagos Island was clear after the rain, the light coming in flat and bright. She sat with it for a moment. Then she took the planner from the tote bag and set it on the table. She said she needed to ask about the antenatal card. That was still the reason she had come. She said she needed it before Monday. She said it in the same register. She said everything, not asking for a favor, describing a situation that required a resolution. Taiwo picked up his phone and said 3 words into it. 14th floor, please. Then he set it down and looked at the planner on the table between them. "What do you do?" he said. "Not asking for a job title," she told him. The reporting model, 11 hours per cycle, removed from a process the firm had run manually for a decade. The ledger discrepancy, 12 million naira, found mid-meeting, from memory, before anyone opened a spreadsheet. She spoke without ornamentation, in the manner of someone who trusts the figures to carry the weight which they did. He listened. He did not interrupt. His assistant came in 17 minutes later with the antenatal card in a sealed envelope and set it on the table. Taiwo thanked her without breaking the conversation. When the assistant left, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "How long until the baby?" She said, 6 weeks. "And when would you be ready to work?" She said, 12 weeks. He picked up his phone. 1 message, 1 tap of the send key, then face down on the table. "My head of financial reporting has needed a senior analyst for 7 months, he said. 620,000 naira per month. The role begins when you say." He did not ask if she wanted it. Offer was made the way correct offers are made, as a statement of what is, not a question of whether. Zuri opened the planner to the current page. She did the arithmetic in the margin in 40 seconds. The columns were the same small, even figures she always made. Then she closed the planner. 12 weeks. "She's done," he said. What happened to Mrs. Blessing Obiachina arrived the way institutional consequences arrive, through processes, not confrontations. 6 weeks later, a new hiring policy was distributed to all managers at Bright Continental Holdings. Section 3 listed the grounds on which a candidate could be declined, and pregnancy appeared in bold type under a heading that said, "Prohibited grounds. Any instance will trigger an immediate review of the hiring officer's conduct and standing." In the same week, Blessing Obiachina received a letter informing her that her responsibilities were being restructured and that she was being moved from recruitment to administrative services effective the 1st of the following month. The letter gave no reason. It was signed by the deputy managing director. His office reported directly to Chief Taiwo, who had been in his current role for 21 years and had in that time restructured 6 departments, and never explained any of them twice. Mrs. Blessing Obiachina believed she had made a practical decision. She had looked at a candidate across a table and calculated, in the way decisions are made when they are made before the meeting starts, that this hire would create complications. She had said, "We'll be in touch," and moved on. She had done what she believed the position required of her. She had not calculated 11 hours per reporting cycle. She had not calculated a 12 million naira discrepancy caught mid-sentence without a calculator. She had not calculated the mind that could hold a balance sheet in full in structure, in relation, the way most people hold a song they know by heart. She had looked at the midsection and missed the mind entirely. It is the oldest and most expensive mistake the world makes. It decides what a person is worth before asking what a person can do, and in doing so, it loses what it is going to need. Zuri Adesan Nwosu arrived at the lobby of Bright Continental Holdings on a Monday morning 12 weeks later. It was 7:58 a.m. She wore a white blouse ironed the night before and her good shoes, which still had the loose nail in the heel she could feel through the sole on the walk from the bus stop. The same nail that had been there on the Wednesday she first walked through those doors. She had not yet gotten it fixed. She had written it in the planner for next week. Ada Nwachukwu saw her coming through the glass doors and stood up from behind the reception desk. Not because her job required it, because some arrivals require it. Zuri pressed the elevator button for the 14th floor with her right hand. The tote bag was over her left shoulder. The weaver bird on the front was a little more faded than it had been in October. She had not washed the inside lining. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed quietly. She was already thinking about the numbers. "Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it. If you were sitting across that table, and you knew, with complete certainty, that the person looking at your resume had already made their decision, would you sit through the 11 minutes? Would you finish every answer? Or would you stand up and walk out? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. If this story reached something in you, subscribe for more stories about hidden strength and quiet power and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. A new story comes every week. I'll see you in the next one.